Week in the Woods, Day 7. When they arrived at Gray's Notch State Park, the boys on the first bus were divided up into 3 different groups. Mark and Jason and 8 other boys were assigned to a one-room cabin called Raven's Nest. A man named Mr. Frost, Jessica Frost's father, was their cabin chaperone. He looked nice enough to Mark, but he wasn't an outdoors type. More like a salesman, or maybe he worked in an office. Mr. Frost helped the boys find all their luggage and then led the way down the campground road, past the restrooms and bathhouses, past 3 RV slabs and 2 other cabins. Pointing at a log building down a short path from the road, Mr. Frost said, "Here it is, guys, home sweet home." The Raven's Nest had the smell of wood smoke and pine logs, and Mark liked the place instantly. It reminded him of a cabin at his summer camp, except this one was larger and brighter. 6 windows, 1 on either side of the door and 2 on each of the long walls, let in the mid-morning sun. There were 6 bunk beds, 3 along each side wall, leaving an open space in the middle. The wooden floorboards were painted a pale gray. At the end of the cabin opposite the door, there was a stone fireplace, but the opening had been covered with a sheet of black metal. A wood stove stood in front of the fireplace, and its black pipe ran up and then back into a thimble 2 feet above the fireplace mantel. The stove was lit, and it threw off a comfortable warmth. There were 3 sturdy tables, 2 on the left of the fireplace and 1 on the right side, each with 4 wooden chairs. The tabletops were made of thick pine boards. The chairs and the table legs had been painted dark green. While Mark stood in the middle of the room looking around, a mad scramble for the beds began. He turned and rushed to the nearest bunk, arriving at the same moment Jason did, but what looked like a contest never happened, because Jason yelled, "I call top," and Mark shouted, "I got the bottom." Amid the jumble and noise, Mr. Frost said, "All right, boys, take it easy now. Plenty of room for everyone. Get your sleeping bags unrolled, set out your shoes and boots. Just sort of get settled in. And if you've got things to hang up like coats and jackets or towels, use the hooks on the walls or the hooks on the ends of the bunks. Don't be throwing stuff around or dropping it wherever. We are going to be here a while, so keep things organized, okay? Now on my schedule it says we've got some time here before the general meeting at the Big Lodge at 11. But that doesn't mean you can wander off somewhere. No one goes anywhere unless I know about it first. And I mean anywhere, all week. We clear on that, everyone?" All the boys nodded, so Mr. Frost said, "Good. Now most of your things should stay in your suitcases, and you should keep them pushed under your bunks so we're not tripping over them. So just get your stuff organized a little, and then we'll explore the area if there's time." It turned out there wasn't time, because once everyone was settled in, Mr. Frost decided to organize a firewood brigade. "Listen up, guys. It's not going to get above 50 today, and it's going to be downright chilly tonight. So anybody who doesn't want to shiver all night, line up." All 10 boys from the Raven's Nest followed him down the road to the parking lot beside the gatehouse at the entrance to the campground. Mr. Maxwell had arranged to have 2 cords of split stove wood dumped there. The boys lined up beside the pile, and Mr. Frost pulled back a corner of the big blue tarp and began to load wood on the outstretched arms of the first couple of boys. Jason was in front of Mark. Mr. Frost stacked 3 pieces of wood onto Jason's arms, and then he motioned to Mark. But Jason said, "I can carry more than this. Give me 2 more, at least." So Mr. Frost said, "Okay," and put on another 2 pieces of wood. It was Mark's turn, and Mr. Frost put 3 pieces of wood on his arms and then said, "Next boy." Mr. Mark shook his head and said, "I can take at least 2 more pieces, maybe 3. Jason had turned to start walking back, but when he heard Mark say that, he looked over his shoulder and said, "Sure you can, in your dreams." But Mr. Frost shrugged and said, "Fine," and loaded Mark with 2 more chunks of wood. When the last piece of wood was balanced on his stack, Mark turned and started walking. Jason was about 20 feet ahead of him. Mark lengthened his stride. After about 30 seconds, he was only a step or 2 behind. Mark felt the muscles in his shoulders complain about the weight of the wood. He felt his wrists ache from being bent upward at such an odd angle, but he didn't care. With a grim smile, Mark notched his speed up a little higher. As if he had radar, Jason glanced over his shoulder and saw Mark closing in. He grinned. "Oh, no, you don't," he said, and he sped up. It was an all-out race. Every time Mark tried to pass him, Jason accelerated and swerved like a NASCAR driver. Both boys were huffing, their faces red from exertion, and they zoomed by the other 2 kids who had loaded up before them. At the last second, Mark surged forward and managed to get next to Jason. Shoulder to shoulder, they reached the path that went left from the roadway back toward the Raven's Nest. The path went between 2 trees, and it was narrow, and Jason had the inside position. Mark had to give way, but he wouldn't, and he didn't. The racers collided, their loads of wood clunking into the tree trunks and clattering to the ground as the boys tumbled into each other and collapsed into a gasping, laughing heap. Jason reached over and gave Mark a friendly thump on the arm. "That was cheap. I had you all the way." "Yeah?" said Mark. "Then how come you're flat on your back?" Jason didn't answer, and Mark sat up and turned to look at him. Jason was looking up over Mark's shoulder. He wasn't smiling. Someone said, "You all right?" Mark knew that voice. It was Mr. Maxwell. The boys scrambled to their feet, and Jason said, "Oh, sure, we're fine." "We bumped into each other, that's all," said Mark, turning to face the man. When Mr. Maxwell saw it was Mark, he scowled and then spoke gruffly. "Well, be more careful, both of you. Now get that mess cleared away." Then he turned on his heel and walked off toward the lodge. Jason and Mark started picking up the wood. When Mr. Maxwell was far enough away, Jason whispered, "I still beat you, loser." Mark whispered back, "Dream on. Maybe you tied, but only because my wood was heavier than that little baby load of yours." Once their wood was stacked outside the door, Jason chased Mark into the cabin, and they beat on each other with pillows until Mr. Frost arrived and added no pillow fights to the list of rules. After the big meeting in the lodge, everyone ate lunch, had a restroom break, and then gathered outside in the council clearing at 1 o'clock. All the kids sat on logs that were arranged in a series of expanding circles. It was like an outdoor auditorium, and the stage was in the center, except it wasn't a stage, just an open space with a stone fire pit. Next to the fire pit, there was a big iron bell mounted on a sturdy wooden post. Once everyone was settled, Mr. Maxwell said, "We're going to start off our week in the woods with the annual Nature Study Scavenger Hunt. Here's how it works." Then he explained that they would split into teams made up of one boys' cabin and one girls' cabin, about 20 kids, and 3 or 4 grown-ups each. Every team would get the same list of 75 things to search for. Little things like an acorn, a piece of mica, a white oak leaf, a pine cone, a piece of quartz, a piece of granite, a shred of birch bark, an aspen leaf, a maple twig, on and on. Mr. Maxwell explained the special rules designed to keep the park from being trampled or ripped up, especially rules about where to search and how to collect the samples. For example, all the plant samples had to be picked up off the ground, never from living trees or bushes. Each team had to stay in a certain area of the campground. Plus, every hunter had to keep a written record of where each object had been picked up so that everything could be returned to its right place in the ecosystem after the hunt. After all the explanations, Mr. Maxwell said, "There's a 1-hour time limit, and you've all got a lot of things to find, so let's get going." Then he pretended to remember something. "Oh, I almost forgot to tell you, members of the last place team will have to help serve and clear tables at dinner tonight. And everybody on the winning team is going to get an extra helping of dessert. So is everyone ready?" 150 kids yelled, "Yeah!" Mr. Maxwell rang the bell and the hunt was on. For an hour, the woods around the campground echoed with the shouts and yells of the hunters. "Quartz! I've got a chunk of quartz! Hey, quick, over here, I found a birch branch on the ground!" Squads of kids picked their way carefully through the search areas. There were arguments and discussions, notes were scribbled into the logbooks, and as time ran out, the pace intensified. And all the while, the parents and the teachers kept careful watch to be sure no one strayed off into the woods in search of that perfect granite pebble or a missing hemlock cone. When the big bell at the council clearing rang at 2:15, all the teams gathered for the judging. That part of the event was almost as noisy as the collecting had been. It went quickly, with 3 teams of judges moving from group to group. There was a lot of cheering and clapping, and there were more arguments too. Disputes about what would count and what wouldn't were settled by Mr. Maxwell. Mark watched carefully as the judges went over his team's collection. He and Jason had worked as a pair, and together they had found 18 items for the team. Altogether, their group had found 62 of the 75 things on the list before time ran out. But they didn't win. Another team had found 67. They wouldn't be having an extra dessert, but they wouldn't have to clear the tables either. At 3 o'clock, Mark and his cabin mates headed back to the Raven's Nest for a half-hour break before the next activity. The cabin had cooled off a little, so Mr. Frost got the poker off the wall by the fireplace, opened the door of the stove, and raked some live coals toward the front of the firebox. Then he put a couple of small logs into the stove, shut the door, and began to fiddle with the airflow adjustment. Mark sat down on his bed. After unlacing his hiking boots, he pulled his pack out from under the bunk to look for his Jack London book. Jason sat down at the other end of Mark's mattress and started rooting around in his suitcase. Just as Mark found his book, Jason whispered, "Hey, Mark, check this out." Looking around carefully, he reached toward Mark with something in his hand. Mark put out his hand, and he took it. Jason whispered, "Turn toward me so no one sees it." Mark held the thing close to his body and took a quick look down. It was a brown leather case, about 4 inches long, an inch and a half wide, and 1 inch thick. The flap on the front was held shut with a round copper snap. There had once been some gold lettering on the flap, but it was mostly worn away. The thing weighed a lot, almost half a pound. "Go on," urged Jason. "Take it out." Mark tugged the snap open, lifted the flap, and pulled out something made of stainless steel. Turning it over in his hands, it looked like 2 separate rectangles of metal, hinged together at one end. Then Mark knew what it was. He'd seen things like this on the REI website. They called them multi-tools. He nodded at Jason and whispered, "Cool." Taking hold at the end opposite the hinge, Mark pulled the sides of the tool outward, folded them all the way around, and in 2 seconds the object was transformed into a pair of sturdy needle-nose pliers. "This is great," and it was. The tool was wonderfully made, solid and heavy in his hand. The door of the cabin slammed, and Mark turned instinctively toward the sound. Then he quickly turned back and tucked the tool under his leg. Mr. Maxwell stood in the doorway. He talked to the whole cabin, but his eyes kept coming back to Mark. "How's it going here in the Raven's Nest? Looks like you've got everything you need." "I'm just checking every cabin to make sure everyone's comfortable. You guys are great, though. Got a fire going, got your wood pile started. Looks like you're all set." Mr. Frost was on his feet smiling at Mr. Maxwell. "We're doing fine, just fine. Terrific bunch of boys here, and we can't wait for dinner." "Won't be long now," said Mr. Maxwell. "Right after your meetings with the subject teachers. I'll see you all there, okay?" He turned, put his hand on the doorknob, and then hesitated. Turning back around, he walked over to Mark. He pointed down at the bunk and said, "Unless I'm missing, you're hiding something under your leg there. Am I mistaken?" Mark gulped. Then he shook his head. "No, you're right. It's a tool." And he reached under his leg, picked it up, and held it out. Mr. Maxwell took it from him. In his big hands, the tool looked like a toy. He turned it over once or twice. Then he bent the ends around and folded the pliers back into the handles. Holding it up between his big thumb and forefinger, Mr. Maxwell wagged the tool at Mark and said, "I'm sorry I found this. You shouldn't have this here." Nodding at the bed, he said, "Hand me the sheath." Mark gave it to him. Pointing below the bunk, Mr. Maxwell said, "Grab your pack and get all your stuff into it." Mark was confused. "All my stuff? Why?" "Why?" said Mr. Maxwell. "I'll tell you why. Because of this." And holding the tool in one hand, he flipped at the edge with his thumb. Out popped a 4-inch blade. "This is a knife." And the instructions for a week in the woods said no student was to bring a knife of any kind. But it's more than that, because this is a school-sponsored event. So this is really school, just like a field trip or an assembly. And our district has a zero-tolerance rule about bringing weapons to school. So this knife means you are going to be suspended from school. Mr. Maxwell folded the knife blade back into the handle, put the tool into its case, and then dropped it into his jacket pocket. "So like I said, pack up all your stuff. Now, you know what my truck looks like. The old blue GMC, almost in a daze." Mark nodded. Mr. Maxwell said, "It's parked in the lot by the gatehouse. Toss your stuff in the back and wait for me in the cab. You're going home." Then Mr. Maxwell turned and walked out the door. Except for the metallic creaking of the wood stove, it was silent in the Raven's Nest. Mark's face was burning hot. Feeling as if he was moving in a dream, he stood up, turned around, bent down, and started rolling his sleeping bag. Jason jumped to his feet. Mark looked up, and Jason pointed at himself, mouthing the words, "I should tell." Mark shook his head. "No," he whispered. "I'm the one who got caught. I'll get in less trouble than you would. Really, it's okay." It took Mark less than 3 minutes to load his pack and strap the rolled sleeping bag to the bottom. He stepped clear of the bunk, swung the pack around onto his back, and walked to the door. Stopping, he looked back, glancing from face to face around the room. He saw a lot of pale faces, even a couple of watery eyes. Forcing a thin smile to his lips, Mark said, "See you guys. Sorry." Then he left. Chapter 15. Retrial. It took Mr. Maxwell about 15 minutes to locate Mrs. Stearns. After checking over at the girls' cabins, he walked back and found her at the main lodge. Taking her aside, he explained what he had to do. "And I'm going to have to leave you in charge for a couple of hours, all right?" "My goodness," she said, shaking her head. "You'd think that boy would have more sense than to do something so stupid. But sooner or later, everybody's got to learn that no means no, even when your daddy's got $500 million. I'll keep things on track here, Bill, but please hurry back." Walking along the roadway toward the gatehouse, Mr. Maxwell assured himself that he was doing the right thing. The rules are the rules, and they've got to be obeyed, he said to himself. I can't make an exception here, not even if I wanted to. And the odd thing was, part of Mr. Maxwell wanted to. He almost wished he could let Mark off the hook. He had watched Mark earlier during the scavenger hunt. The boy really got into it. Such a difference from the way he'd been acting in science class. Of course, lately, Mr. Maxwell knew that he hadn't been any help at all. Hadn't exactly been encouraging Mark to participate. He'd been stiff-arming the kid every chance he got. But watching Mark this afternoon, seeing him scramble around through the brush, laughing and shouting to his friends, Mr. Maxwell's heart had begun to soften a little. He'd been tempted to consider giving the kid another chance. Not wipe the slate clean or anything, but just ease up on him a bit and see what would happen. And now this. Mr. Maxwell kept quizzing himself, testing his motives. He asked himself, if it had been some other kid, would I have reacted like this? Or would I have just said, nice tool, but you better let me keep it till the week is over? Would I? But the fact was, it wasn't some other kid. It was this kid, Mark Robert Chelmsley. And if I did let him off on this, it wouldn't be good for him. That's what Mr. Maxwell told himself, and he believed it. It was like Mrs. Stearns had said, everybody's got to learn about obeying rules, and sometimes you have to learn the hard way. At the door of the gatehouse, Mr. Maxwell paused, his hand on the knob. Looking across the wide parking lot, he could see the roof of his blue pickup, and he thought of the boy sitting in the front seat. And he thought, kid's been over there stewing in his own juices for 20 minutes now. Maybe that's been enough. Maybe he's learned his lesson. But his years of experience kicked in and said, no, discipline isn't discipline unless you follow through and make it stick. Inside, the ranger was on the phone. Yeah, I'll hold. Covering the mouthpiece, he said, hey, Bill, good to see you. Mr. Maxwell nodded and smiled as he leaned across the counter and shook the man's hand. Pointing at the phone, the ranger said, only be a minute here. Speaking to the phone again, he said, hey, Tommy, it's Jim Pletcher, over at Gray's Notch. Yeah, pretty good. Tell me, do you think you could get a vacuum truck over here tomorrow morning? I think the pit behind the main sanitary unit must have picked up some groundwater over the winter. Yeah, been some complaints. Yep, that's what it smells like. Appreciate it, Tommy. See you tomorrow. Hanging up, he turned to Mr. Maxwell, smiling broadly. Sorry I missed you this morning. Looks like a great gang of kids, just like old times, every spring. Now, what can I do you for? Just need to use the phone, Jim. Got sort of an emergency. Geez, Bill, should have told me to hang up. Handing Mr. Maxwell the receiver, he said, here, anything I can help with? You need a vehicle or anything? No, it's not a real emergency, Jim. Just a kid who's going home. Kind of a smart-mouth rich kid. Thinks the rules are for everyone else. Little bit of a tough guy. What, he start a fight or something? Asked the ranger. Take a poke at you? No, nothing like that, said Mr. Maxwell. He had a knife. Geez, kid come at you with a knife? Did he cut you? Mr. Maxwell shook his head and put his hands up. Whoa, Jim, slow down. He didn't come at me with anything. He just had the knife with him. It's a Leatherman, one of the big ones. Mr. Maxwell took the tool out of his pocket and laid it on the counter. The ranger picked it up and took it out of its sheath. Turning it over a few times in his hands, he squinted at it. Glancing up at the teacher, he said, Geez, Bill, it isn't really that big, is it? And it's more of a tool, too. The kid's getting sent home for this? Gonna miss the whole week? Mr. Maxwell nodded. It's a weapons rule. Probably be suspended, too. No knives at any school activity. The ranger studied the tool again, and then squinted up into Mr. Maxwell's face. Even here in a state park? In the woods and all? I'm not telling you how to run your program here, Bill, but that seems pretty rough. Did you give the kid a chance to say he was sorry or anything? I mean, I could talk to him, if you want me to, Be extra serious and everything. When I get my hat on, I can look real official. Throw a good scare into him if you want. What do you say? I'm sure I can get through to him. What's the boy's name? Mr. Maxwell smiled and shook his head. His name is Mark, and I thank you, Jim. But I know this kid. Somebody's got to come down hard on him. Might as well be me. Best thing for him. Would you mind stepping outside for a minute? This won't take long. It'll be a toll call, but the school will pay for it. The ranger nodded and went out the door, still holding on to the tool. When the ranger came back inside a minute later, Mr. Maxwell was talking on the phone, trying not to lose his temper. Yes, I understand that Mr. Chelmsley isn't home right now, but surely you've got a number where he could be reached. I know it's later over there, but I'm sure he'd want me to wake him up. This is important. The ranger motioned for Mr. Maxwell to cover the mouthpiece. Then he said, Bill, tell those folks you'll call him right back, okay? Mr. Maxwell shook his head. Jim, I'm handling this. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but The ranger put his hand on Mr. Maxwell's arm and looked him in the eye. Bill, just tell him you'll call back. Go on, tell him that right now. Lips pressed tightly together, Mr. Maxwell took his hand off the mouthpiece and said, Hello? Yes, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to call you back, all right? Yes, everything's fine. Yes, Mark is fine. I'll call you back. Goodbye. Turning to squarely face the ranger, Mr. Maxwell said, Jim, I know you. Bill, said the ranger, holding up his hand. Forget all that. Just answer me one question. This boy's name is Mark. What's his last name? Chelmsley, snapped Mr. Maxwell. His last name is Chelmsley, but I've already told you. The ranger held up his hand again. Hear me out, Bill. If this boy's name is Mark Chelmsley, then what do you make of this? Handing the knife to Mr. Maxwell, the ranger pointed at the flat side of the handle. Mr. Maxwell had to hold the knife almost at arm's length, and when he did, and tilted it to catch the light, he saw what the ranger was talking about. Something was scratched into the brushed finish on the stainless steel, some crude letters. Squinting, he looked again, and the letters snapped into focus. Jason Frazier.